Program, courtesy of WCBL, Shelby McCallum. This is Ray Mofield speaking, reminding you that these tapes are available at the Murray State University Pogue Oral History Library, at the Marshall County Library, and at the State Archives in Frankfort, Kentucky. Our guest today, Mr. Gilbertsville, we might call him, L.R. Fieldson, now living in Benton. Mr. Fieldson, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here, Mr. Mofield. I'm really interested in this because this was where I was born, where I was raised, and from a people that I dearly love even today.
I know we're going to talk mostly about Gilbertsville, but very briefly, tell us your father and mother's name.
My father's name was Thomas Fieldson, originally born in England and came to the United States at 9 years old. And my mother was Ella Vickers from McLean County, and she's a descendant of the Drakes, Sir Francis Drake.
Oh, the famous English sea captain.
That's what my mother seems to think.
Well, that's wonderful. What a distinguished lineage you have.
And I never did see my grandmother, but her grave's in the old Pinnacle Cemetery, and I take care of it now. She's the only one that's left there of my people.
Where did you go to school?
First, I went to Old Gilbertsfield School. That was a time when it had gotten to be a two-story building, and I was downstairs. That's where the little folks started. And I went about 1 year, and this is a funny thing, I was so restless that I chewed up 2 of the beginner's book on the first class.
Yeah. All right, you finished school there. You eventually grew up. Then whom did you marry?
I married Elsie Dunn, Sam Dunn's youngest daughter. The Dunn family is very well known around Palma, and there were several of them, and they were fine people. And in fact, my wife's father and mother took care of us during the Depression. If it hadn't been for that, I guess we would be in the cemetery somewhere.
Well, luckily they did then. Yeah. Did you have any children?
We have 3 children. We have Sammy, who is selling these coachmen or these campers down at Draftonville. And we have Sue, which is our second child, born in Mayfield when we were a missionary for Grays County. And she married Joel Allen, which is born and reared here in Benton. And Larry Ray, our youngest child, was born, he was born in Paducah, but we were living that time at Bryansburg, and he is, of course, up near 40 years old, and he has got a good job at Air Products in Paducah at Calvert City, and he is traffic coordinator for Air Products.
Yes, sir.
And my 3 children has really done well.
Do you have any grandchildren?
We have 5. We have 5. We have one 23 years old, a girl, and have another girl, 20 years old. And then we have 2 youngest children who their grandparents were Boyce English and his wife, and our son and Naomi, their mother, they separated, and of course we get them. That is, my son does, and that's 4, and there's one more somewhere else that I can't. There's 5. I just don't recall. I can't get the other one to come to me. And Sue's got 2 children. Larry's got 2. Sammy's got 1.
All right.
Yeah, that's an adopted one. She's 20 years old. She's a graduate of Marshall High School.
Very fine. Mr. Fieldson, how have you earned a living?
When When I go into school at Gilbertsfield, at that time I had gained in grades and gotten to the top floor, second floor of the old Gilbertsfield school. It was not a high school at that time, and of course I went to this school until. In those days, you had to take examination in order to qualify to go to high school, and they would you used to had to come to Benton, and everybody from all the schools that were taking the examination would have to come to Benton, and the examination was given there. But when my sister and I took the examination, they brought they had two men, Johnny Owens and a fellow by the name of Bondurant, came to the Gilbertsfield School and gave us the examination. It took 2 days, and we both passed the examination. And I went to high school 2 years. Sis went on to Paducah, and she took 4 years there. I believe maybe 2 years at Calvert and 2 years at Paducah, at Dorn's high school then. And so I, looking out the windows, the grass looked greener than it did anywhere else. And in 2 years of high school, well, I left and went to public works for about 10 years. I first went to West Virginia 2 years where my brother was working in the coal fields, and I worked there and lived with him, and then I didn't like that at all, and I came on back home, and that's when the rush was on for Detroit. Ford was making the Model Ts. Mm-hmm. And of course, some of our people in Gilbertsfield had gone to Detroit, and they brought back the news that if you want to work, you just anywhere in Detroit that you happen to stop and ask for a job, you'll get it. Mm-hmm. And so I went and I got a job, and I stayed there and until the Depression hit, and I left and came home, and I had a cousin in St. Louis, and I had left word with them if there ever was an opening in the factory that he worked, that to remember me. And I hadn't been home hardly a month until my mother's sister called and said they have offered you a job. And so I caught the train, went there, and I spent 2 years there, and then I entered into the ministry and came back home, and I went to Union a half a year and got high school work, then came back under Vernon James at the high school at Gilbertsfield. Then is a 4-year high school, and they covered me up with courses, mm-hmm. and I was able to graduate, get a diploma from high school at my home church, Gilbertsfield. And about 2 years after that, TVA closed the school completely out. They took over the town.
Yeah.
And that's where I got my education. Of course, I went to Union University. With the courses all that I took, and would measure up to about 3 years college. And I was an old man, 28 years old when I married, and I was around 30 when I had to come home on account of my wife's health, that she was having to work and so forth to pay her. Of course, that's still Depression time, and of course that we had to come home and came to her father's mother, and Depression was still on. And of course, TVA bought my wife's father's farm down near Gilbertsfield, where the road leads to go across the bottom. And that he got word that the George Lemon Farms at Bryansburg was for sale, very reasonable, 124 acres, I believe, or maybe something like that, in a nice country home. And well improved, and Mr. Dunn bought that, and wife and I, we went up there and held it down until they could move, and we stayed with them, and then I got going to school. Of course, I was going here, there, and yonder, and of crossroads, schoolhouses, and different places. In those days, the old preachers had all the churches and just quarter time and half time, and they made their living by digging in the soil just like I had to.
Yes, sir.
And of course, today that's different. And it's been a very, well, it looks, back then I thought it was an awful hard life, but as I look back at it now, it was a worthy life because I did get an education, I got a lot of experience, and I became a student of the Bible. In fact, I never did cease to study the Bible after I left Union University. Of course, I was taking regular courses there with Bible, which is an elective course. And I spent my time, I went home, and then finally I got sort of where people would listen to me as a preacher, and I got to be pastor of churches. They were usually quarter-time churches, one Sunday a month. But I was the type of fellow, I wasn't satisfied with that. Not that I was anxious to preach, but I wanted to get the people out of the rut. And I was willing, I didn't care nothing. A lot of preachers went out and say, well, how much money did you get? I never thought about the money proposition. Mm-hmm. I thought about trying to help get the church on the move, and I'd give them full time. I did that to all the churches except one, and organized too. Organized the church at Sharp, the Baptist Church at Sharp, which now's got over $100,000 plant, and the one at Lakeview's got over $100,000 plant in the building. And of course, it's not everybody knows that, and I'm not blowing my horn that I've done. The people did it. Mm-hmm. I was just there, and especially at Sharp, I drug my feet. They say, we can do this. I say, you better go slow. Mm-hmm. No, let's go. Well, we organized church and had just 8 members, and that old garage building of Clarence Fowler down there.
Yes, sir.
And now then they've got off of the road over there a little ways. They've got a nice church building, and they've got a fairly nice congregation and full-time ministry, and got a good pastor, and they're doing good. Well, same way at Lakeview, and that was where I learned that they're the one that had to suffer. I'd go over there during the summertime, brush harbors, and go to the old Pew Schoolhouse, and they had to suffer to listen to me, in the same way at Locust Grove.
Thank you very much, and you're to be congratulated on all of your efforts at self-improvement. Now, you know a great deal about the early history of Gilbertsville. As you look at that general area, would you say that the pioneers picked a wonderful place to build a town, or were there some handicaps?
I would have to, and I say this kindly and with every respect in the world of those people, because they paid a tremendous price. That wasn't a thing that bothered them so much. But I'd say if I was looking at it today to see this 1,000-acre federal survey by this man, and the river and all of it, uncleared, unsettled, I'd say I'd turn around and go back the other way.
It was sort of a swampy area, wasn't it?
It was surrounded by streams that when it rained, the streams they emptied all very well, but not all. But when the spring rain ceased, well, then the big places, the water would stagnate.
Malaria became
malarial and typhoid fever were just as common, by the way, as coffee for breakfast. Mm-hmm. And that's like I told you when you were talking to me the other day. And we'll get to those streams. If we want to, I can get to them now. There is Kaler Creek, some call it Taylor Creek, and it enters into the Tennessee River below the road that goes to the river now, and it entered in down there. I have gone swimming years ago when we could go in swimming with our birthday suits on. That was before the women folks began to gather in down, and we had to stop that. Mm-hmm. Well, you follow that stream all the way back, and there's a bank, a river bank, and then there's a river bottom, and then there is a high bank that you come up. When you come up out of that river bottom, or past over that Kaler Creek slough, well, you come up a pretty steep bank there, and that bank, This picture that I have here will give you an idea. Oh, there it is, right there.
You have the very plat of
and there it is, and that Kaler Creek came this way. Of course, the river made a bend, and went on down there, and then on a little ways down, it went right to the river. And here it went on back and went up and onto the new railroad when it was built in and put in use in 1904, Iron Bridge. Why, then it went on across different farms and went on for miles across farms, crooked and twisted around, and went clear on to its beginning up to the Zen Hall place. And then there's another stream that I might give you an idea about it by showing you here on my map, all right? And this has a funny name, and now this is according to TVA. The TVA called it Raccoon Slough, all right? But it was East Cypress Creek. We begin up here at the Gregory place. This is at the end, right here. This is the end. This here was some of my own doing that I was wrong on. But this is a line of the 1,000-acre survey. All right, the Gregory place up here, J.R. Gregory, and up in here was where this wasn't a very large place. In the wintertime, I have known boys to ice skate on that with the old-fashioned skates that you fasten on your shoe with a key.
I see that's dated November 22nd, 1850 on the plat.
That was when this here was laid out. Well, it wasn't laid out, but see, it got in the hand of the man who made the survey. Then he got in. Then he had two men. He had to go according to court, and Edward Colson, the executor, and of the Raleigh Colson land, and went to Stephen J. Foster, and then that's when this transaction was made. But later on, this fella sold this tract of land to L.M. Flooney, F-L-O-U-N-R-Y, I believe is the way it's spelled. And that's the purpose for this date here. And this stream here went by Tom Vickers's down here. It wasn't a very large stream at all. But anyway, it ran on down here. And of course the railroad come up through here, and it made a bend and went across above this slough.
What was that railroad first called?
Elizabethtown and Paducah.
And then later...
Later, it was called the Southwestern, Louisville, Paducah, and Southwestern Railroad, and that was in 74.
Yes, sir.
And later on, I don't have that now, but you could go on, you find it changed. They go broke. At least that's the way I look at it. And so, but getting back to what the land was, this was here now. Original, at the very origin of this, the people coming here, you wonder, well, they didn't know nothing about this, well, they went on down here, went under the railroad, went down the ways, then it come on down and went down the railroad again, and came down to just past West Gilbertsville, and went through Floyd Wade. He lives on the upper Big Cypress Road as you leave Gilbertsville, where Joe Howard place was, and there's water standing down there, and I call that his hog lot. And they went on down there, and here was Beaver Dam. They came on down here, and they meet. Beaver Dam, and then Cypress, they called it Cypress Creek.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to be pretty good, and always held water. Beaver Dam always held water, and it came on down there. And then the swamps, you might have heard about or read about, maybe you didn't read about it, but back when I was a boy, and I lived on the farm at that time, why, they ran a ditch through the swamps beginning up this road between Palma and it came up by Charlie Don's. You know where Charlie Don lived.
Yes.
Well, right back, it goes to turn, go by Charlie Don, going back out and coming out over towards Palma. Right down that Charlie Don, and well, it was a Powell Holler. There's where they set that boat up, put it together, and they started digging that thing, and they never did pay off at all. It filled up as fast as they dug it. And they dug this stream of water. Now, this is Beaver Dam here, but this swamp was over here a little further this way. I don't have it on the map. And this swamp, they dug it, and they turned that water loose just about the same place where these all come together, and they stopped after it went in under the railroad. And, of course, people thought that what they wanted to do is go straight onto the river with it, and thought it'd empty that way. Well, they didn't do it. They went under the railroad, which was about in here, and they set into it, and it became, went on down by Calvert City. You've gone over a lot of times, going down that way. After you went over the railroad, but the next thing you went over was that creek, and it went on down to Big Cypress.
Yes, sir.
And it became a mighty ditch on down about Big Cypress. Then it went into the river. Well, that's where all of this water, eventually, it would, if it got up so high, would go down that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they had there. They had Kaler Creek that went right around the edge of the town, as you see, right over there.
Yes, sir.
The edge of the town. Many a time you could look down there and see water stand. Now, because us boys, when we went to school up here, we'd go down on that bank and smoke. And well, the teacher couldn't see us, you know, and that's where us boys went during recess and dinner time. And so they had as repeating, going.
Did you ever hear of smoking rabbit tobacco?
Yes, I didn't call it that, but I heard of that. That was Life Everlasting.
Yes, sir.
Oh, well, that's where I started that on Life Everlasting when I was about 6 years old. Boyfield, Boston, and Grapevine, and that's what I was supposed to smoke, because Mother wouldn't allow us. Well, where we hid it, wouldn't smoke in front of her at all. Us children, she carried us to the farm after Dad died in 1910. Why, she carried us to the farm where that she could really give us a kind of a training that we needed, because we'd been outlaws if we'd stayed in Gilbertsville. And it was so, well, she had 9 children and lost, well, by the time she was smoke cleared away, she just had, well, now there's just 2 of us living. At one time, I had a brother in West Virginia.
What was one of the names they called it? Something about Freedom Corner?
Yeah, it's called Freedom Corner. I forgot to put that in. Yeah, Freedom Corner. Some come by driving around and they'd holler out, it's a Freedom Corner, or they'd holler, oh, there it is right there. And I probably told you before how come that, in my way of thinking, and maybe I'd heard it too, because in that day that this was so primitive, so grown up into whatever nature had brought forth in timber and other things, that the people that got in trouble over here in Marshall County at the county seat, I would say when they used to, and when I remember, when they had what do they call that first meeting you had, you know, that they get together and they'd question, find out, would you have any part in this and that and the other? Grand jury, yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, they'd stay away from grand jury, so what they'd do, they'd slip off down in there, and nobody would find them. Nothing but wild hogs and things like that was down there. Mm-hmm. That was back over in here now. Back in here, I don't know what might have been in this part of it, but it was now, Mr. Mofield, really, in my way of thinking. Now, I didn't see it, and my mother, I never talked about it. She came, and she didn't regret coming here, because where they live in McLean County, my uncle told me, and my brother, we went up there one time together in later years, just see it now. And I saw it after it had been worked over, under this program of agriculture. And I saw some of the finest fields of grass and corn I ever had seen in the world. I said, Uncle Jake, I said, how come you ought to leave such a fine place as this? He said it wouldn't raise black-eyed peas.
Back when they left.
Yeah, that was when he lived up there. When my grandfather, John Ray Vickers, mother's dad, when they left up there and came down here, and some more Vickers now. There's my grandfather, John Ray, and William Vickers, who was what we call the undertaker man. In other words, he sold what fashion caskets they had in that day. I don't know what you call them, caskets or not, but he had them setting up around the wall, and he had a shop behind. If he didn't have what they want, well, they'd go back there and make it. Then I heard later years on up around Bethel, there was a man that brought lumber in, the fine lumber. I don't know what it was now. I never did see it, but I heard of it.
Might have been walnut.
Well, it could have been. It could have been cypress. It could have been. I don't know what it could have been. And he had set up there, and body had someone to pass away. Go down there to his place and say, well, I need a casket, or maybe they said I need a box to bury my dad in. I don't know what it said. But I remember real well one time visiting now the Vickerses. See, my mother was a Vickers, and there was John Rafe, there was Pete, there was Uncle Will. They came down there, and another one that didn't stay, as Lee Vickers's daddy didn't stay, and they had their families and lived around there, and I grew up amongst a lot of cousins. And back then, cousins, my mother and the others that had same relationship between their fathers, they were just like brothers and sisters. Why, the mother would say to us when she is a widow woman, stayed a widow woman after Dad died, and she said, get the team ready. We'll go to Cousin Alma today. And she was the oldest of all of those first cousins, or second, whichever it might be. And she'd say, well, we're going to Cousin so-and-so today. We'd go. They'd come to our place. And they'd have a big meal, and they'd sit around and talk while they was cooking, and sit down and talk a little while after, and just really loved and had a good time together.
They visited one another.
And you know what they called my mother? Every one of them, Cousin L. Cousin L. You take that Ruth, who lost her husband here a while back, and Vera V., who just buried last Sunday. Vera V.'s daddy was Tom Vickers, and Ruth, of course, was a sister to Vera V., and her daddy was Tom Vickers. And so...
Harrison Vickers was a war hero, wasn't he?
Yes, he was of World War I, and he got killed in a train wreck over there in France, or over there somewhere in that battlefield. And he came out of two sets of family, Lee Vickers and Harrison Vickers, I believe. They might have been, Harrison might have been a half-brother to Lee.
The American Legion post is named for him.
Yeah, named it. And, of course, there was one and then a set of twins down there, but they were white girls, and they come to our church out there. And their mother just died about 3 or 4 years ago. And I don't know but what, maybe she is a sister to Lee or half-sister. In other words, Lee Vickers' dad, I believe his first wife died and the second wife, and he had 2 sets of children, but not too many. But he had more children himself. He had several. Lee Vickers had a whole bunch of children, and his daughter last Sunday buried her second husband. We didn't get to see him, but he had been married before, and he married one of them. And of course, I grew up with those cousins, on second or third, whichever they were. We were pretty close. In other words, I had a lot of kin folks.
Yes, sir.
And we all come down through here. Okay, they came down here before, and Dad came down here, and he got this farm way back out beyond this, 2 acres out here, and lived on it and had a grape vineyard. I'll tell you this innocent story. This is back before they ever voted dry or wet, and So it's a ridge farm. And now my brother-in-law and my sister lived on that farm because that farm changed hands. Dad sold it, gave it to Mother, to a fellow by the name of Ford, and Ford couldn't pay for it, so he gave it back to Mother right at the right time, 19 and 10. Then, well, that's just the right thing for Mother to do. That as far as us children was concerned.
That's right.
Because I understand this is what they told on us. Now, not me, because I was nothing little fellow. 1910, see, I was born 1904. That just made me 6 years old. And they'd tell me that, of course, my older brothers about, well, the older one, Martin and Pat, were probably been 12 and 14, somewhere along there, and the rest of us on down. Like, and they said that when one kid that way, and Mother went and got that one. There was one over the back way.
Mr. Fieldson, we have just about.
I've been 12 and 14, somewhere along there, and the rest of us on down, like a step ladder. And they said that when one kid went over the fence that way, and Mother went and got that one, there was one going over the fence the back way.
Yeah. Mr. Fieldson, we have just about a minute left. Do you have some special thing you'd like to get on before we sign off?
Well, I want to say that this, I cannot, other than just taking what I have found from the study.
You've done a lot of research there.
Cannot picture the primitiveness of this place.
Mm-hmm.
Now this is at 1,000 acres. Now there's another. He had another 1,000 acres, and these books here have. I could read to you here all day, beginning with the first transaction and all the way on down till we go clear on out to Locust Grove and Birmingham and the Bryansburg Grove. But to put a story together. And then the original people who owned it, say, for way back to now, the first land that was sold was 1850. Mm-hmm. 1850. And that was J.M.R. Jenkins. And first piece of land that was sold in that tract of land was 1851, rather.
More than 80 years ago.
1851, and then that same man, and he came from, I believe, from Virginia, they tell me. And then he bought another tract of land. I'll show you the picture of it. Here it is. There is the 400 acres that he bought, and it was 1851. And he bought this one, 96 acres, 1856. 1857, he died.
Mm-hmm.
And so then his wife was settled up a estate about 1873. And here is let's see, J.M.R. Jenkins, 1851. Now then...
this says 1872.
Yeah, well, right here, Nancy Jenkins, and let's see, Nancy Jenkins, and let's see if I have one that'll show. Now there was a division by the court of Marshall County. Mm-hmm. J.M.R. Jenkins is buried in, and I'd like to read this before they close, Jenkins, and he left that and divided up to his children. I'd like to read something here. Here, J.M.R. Jenkins, see there, died at the age of 31. Yes. 10 months and 20 days. I will see the rocks in the Pinnacle Cemetery, and now then TVA has left it grow up and sold in certain type of grass. My grandmother's the only one left. My dad moved all of his dead from, it used to be the burying ground. When I was a kid, Pinnacle Cemetery was, and our farm was just one farm between. And it says, one little son and two daughters sleeping by his side. And his will and date was written September 17, 1856. Probated September 24, 1857. Nancy's wife was a willed executor of the estate as long as she lived. Then all the whole and divided equally between the children, or 6 children.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Fieldson. You have so much information there.
Well, I just
It's
give you
apparent to me that
part
we
of it.
could go all week
Yeah, well,
and
here,
without covering all of it. This is Ray Mofield speaking. We return you now to our studios.